My name is Catherine Bratspis. I'm here with my grandfather, Louis L Hauser, Jr. Today is Wednesday, December 30th, 2015. Now, Grandpa, can you tell me when you were born and where?
I was born in Philadelphia in 1933, April 27th of 1933.
Where do you live now?
Now I live in Hatboro, Pennsylvania.
So you were born during the Great Depression,
That is correct.
and you were a child during World War II?
That is correct.
What sort of things did your family do to conserve?
Well, we used to have what they called a victory garden, in which people would plant common vegetables that were easily accessible to everybody and easy to take care of. That I remember. Then our family used to have what they called coupon books. You couldn't buy butter or sugar or cigarettes without coupons. You had to have the federal government coupons.
Do you remember anything growing up in such a hostile time?
Yes, I remember receiving letters from a man who was in the United States Navy, who was in the submarines. And he used to send me special letters that would be censored. Now, he worked for my father down at Charles E. Heyer's company, Soda Pop, and he always wrote to me at least once a month. And every time I got a letter, it was all blacked out in certain spots.
Did you have any siblings or close relatives that you grew up with?
Yes, I had two sisters. Eleanor, she was 6 years older than I, and Betty, who was 2 years older than I.
Did you do anything for fun?
We played softball, make-up football, just played around tag. We just kept always on the go, always having fun.
What sort of jobs did you have prior to the war?
I had a milkman's job. I delivered milk.
Do you have any stories from your milkman days?
Yes, I do. I have one that I think was hilarious because I really didn't know. The dairy was owned by a classmate's father, and he asked me if I wanted a job delivering milk. I said yes. Well, they put me on the truck after they taught me how to drive it, but they didn't tell me what I had carried. So I stopped at this lady's house, delivered the milk, and she said, "Oh, by the way, do you have any sour cream?" So me thinking sour cream, no lady, all of our milk is absolutely fresh, just bottled this morning. She laughed like the devil. Then I found out what sour cream was.
So, before you entered the service, did you have any career options, anything you were planning to do?
I planned to go to college, but I didn't know where. I thought that I'd like to become a mathematician, but I was thinking about Millersville only because I knew of it.
Were you drafted or did you enlist? And how old were you?
I was drafted into the Army.
How old were you?
I was 19 years of age.
So, what was your rank?
I got to be the rank of corporal.
As a corporal, what sort of responsibilities did you have?
I was a squad leader, and it worked out pretty well. I served in Camp Rucker, Alabama. That was primarily an infantry school. Then after we got out of our 16 weeks, we got assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia. And I stayed at Fort Benning, Georgia for the rest of my service time.
And your group, your unit was what was your unit called?
My unit was the 47th Infantry Division. And I was in what we called HAL Company, which was a heavy weapons company. And my particular responsibility was being a gunner on a 105 recoilless rifle, which meant it was mounted on a Jeep, but you could also take it off of a Jeep and fire it from the ground.
Did you enter the service with any of your friends?
Yes, I was fortunate enough because they took a whole slew of us at one time. Our draft board was Jenkintown, so it took the eastern part of Montgomery County. That included Hatboro and Upper Moreland, and some fellows from Abington, and we were all familiar with one another. And I was fortunate enough to go in with some of my classmates, so it did work out well.
What were the men like in your unit?
Yeah, I had some interesting boys in my unit. I had 5 brothers, and if there was trouble to be gotten into, they got into it. And it was never anything serious. But every time you turned around, you knew that at least 2 or 3 of the 5 were going to get KP, and they got it. That's kitchen patrol. They had to clean the pots. They had to ride the range, which was to scrub down the ranges that they use for cooking. And it wasn't a nice job. And they usually got it.
How often did you write home?
Oh, I wrote quite often to my mother, to my sisters, and then I would write a letter whenever a young man would ask me from Western Pennsylvania who didn't know how to write a letter. I don't know how he got in the service, but he used to ask me to write to his girlfriend. He'd tell me what to write, and I would write it.
During your service, did you sustain any injuries?
No, not me personally, but I knew one of our men in our company. We were out firing at what they called a 105 recoilless rifle, and 4.2 mortars. It was the mortar round, and one of the mortars was what we called a short round, and it split a metal tube like a banana peel, and part of it injured and took away part of his lower jaw. And I saw him just before I got out of the service, and they had performed reconstructive surgery on it, and it looked pretty good. That was the only time.
Did you have anything interesting happen to you?
Well, one of the most interesting things happened to me was when we were playing aggressors for the 3rd Army Division, and what we had to do, we would wear a special plastic helmet which had a wooden strip down the center. That meant you were an aggressor. That's how they could tell you, because you had the same uniforms on. And I had received from my mom and dad a wristwatch, and we were on maneuvers down in Texas against the 3rd Army Division, Tank Corps. And what had happened, I lost my watch. So another fellow and I went out, just took a Jeep and went out without authorization, and we searched the area until we found it. And when we came back, luckily, no one had missed us, but I did get my watch back.
Can you tell me about the lightning storm?
Oh yes, we were practicing on the rifle range. We were firing our M2s rifles, and we had them all stacked up, and we were standing here, and they had all electrical wires around us. And all of a sudden, this tremendous storm came up. Now, you have to understand, this is in Alabama. One of the bolts came down and hit a couple of us right in the foot, threw us head over tails, and one fellow was at least 260, big red. He was a friend of mine from New England. And the funny thing is, most of the people around us were from New England. And the southern boys they sent to New England, so they made it just the opposite when they assigned you where you're going for boot camp. And he did get he went to the hospital for a bit.
Now, were you all right, or did you get...
I was okay. The only thing that I got was a shot to the foot, but my boot protected me, I guess. And I did get free whiskey because that was what was used to calm us down. And it went down so nice.
When the war ended, what was the transition like going from military personnel to civilian life?
It was pretty good because you were glad to be out of the service. And I was fortunate enough, because of my service time, to be a recipient of the GI Bill of Rights, which means that they would pay me to go to college.
So where did you end up going?
I went to Millersville State College.
Did you have any post-war jobs?
Yes, I worked for Aspen Tree Expert Company.
What did you do?
Okay. When I first went to Aspen, I was a helper to the fellow who put the tree limbs into the chipper. And then I had a friend who I knew, and he was in the spraying division, and he asked me to work with him. And it was real nice because I knew the guy, I knew the foreman, I knew the driver, so it really made it nice for me. So we would go down to Conowingo Dam, which was on the Maryland-Pennsylvania border, and spray the brush so that there would be no interference with the flow of the water.
So do you have any stories from your experience in that job?
Yes, we told the supervisor that there were snakes there. Now, he didn't believe us. He said, no, there's no snakes down here. So the next day we went down ready for him. We took these huge potato sack bags and we would take a .22 rifle. And the foreman was my neighbor, and he was younger than I, but he was the one who had the .22. And he went down and we shot up a whole bag full of rattlesnakes. We even had a coral snake. And now a coral snake is a viper. And they said they weren't there, but there was one, and he shot it. And we put them all in a bag, rattlers and the viper, and brought them back and put them on our foreman's front door porch. So when we rang the bell and it hit on the side of the house, he almost had a heart attack, I swear. I couldn't believe it. It scared the daylights out of him. But after that, Aspen went into spraying the Conowingo Dam with the helicopters.
How did the war affect your political views, your views on life, or your interests?
Well, it did affect it to an extent that I was now eligible for the GI Bill. And when I had gotten out of the military, I went over to see my buddies that I was in with, and we went over to see our old football coach. And they were going to go to college. This is Dick and Bud. And my best friend was Dick. Later on, Buddy became my best friend because he became my brother-in-law, and we went to college together. So it was very fortunate for me that I was there, and that's how I got into Millersville, because they were going up. The coach said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "You go home, put on a jacket and shirt and tie, you go with them." I went up to Millersville. They said, "You're a serviceman?" I said, "Yes, ex-serviceman." "Well, you have to be in the 50 percentile, were you?" I said, "I don't know," because I didn't have my records, and they never told me where I stood. She said, "Oh, well, why don't you take the test now?" Fortunately, most of the test was English, and I had no problem whatsoever with my grammar or my use of the English language, and I passed with flying colors. They graded it right then and there and said, "See you in September." And that's how I got into Millersville.
Now, you were going to be an algebra teacher before
I
the
wanted
war.
to be a math teacher before the war. However, I was away for 4 years, and I forgot my math. So I quickly decided, what did I want to do? A fellow had told me in the service the quickest way to become a principal was be in an elementary level degree. And I thought, gee, that sounds good. But when I started taking my courses, there would only be maybe out of 25, 26 people, 2 or 3 men, and I'd be one of them. And I said, no, this isn't for me. So I switched over to social studies, and I'm really thankful I did.
How long did you teach?
I taught for 33 years at Upper Moreland High School. That's in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Mwah.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thanks, Grandpa.